Hello and welcome into the Fog.net podcast. My name is Michael Swain, the Kansas beat writer for 24/7 Sports. Fired up about the podcast we have coming your way today. It's officially crossover season. There's KU basketball on Friday night, and on Saturday night there is the Sunflower Showdown between Kansas State and Kansas. Jam-packed weekend. We got a lot to talk about in this podcast. We're going to start by talking a little bit about the upcoming exhibition between Kansas and Arkansas. And we'll get to an interview we did with Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com, taking a deep dive into the KU K-State matchup, everything KU fans need to know about the game. But let's go in the order. It's been a busy week in the world of Kansas athletics. Obviously, KU football media at the start of the week, and then late or in the middle point of the week on Wednesday, I was in Kansas City for Big 12 Media Days. A busy day. Not necessarily a day where maybe you learn a lot, considering the fact that, Bill Self had talked 10 days prior to really recap the early start of practice and the off season. And so for the most part, it was a lot of retread topics on Wednesday at Big 12 Media Days, a lot of big picture stuff nationally, a lot of national reporters there to ask questions and kind of get Bill Self's opinion on the broader perspective of college basketball. Because let's face it, at this point in time, Bill Self is one of the oldest voices in the sport and one of the ones that's been around the longest, has the best resume in the sport. And so people seek out his opinion. And I think you really could see that on Wednesday. As for things that are new for KU basketball fans, obviously there's the injury news with Hunter Dickinson, Rylan Griffin, and Shaquille Moore. Hunter Dickinson sprained his foot prior to late night in the Fog. He then tweaked it during the scrimmage at late night and then has not practiced since. That's as of Wednesday. So he is a doubt for the exhibition against Arkansas. It's not expected that he'll be out there. That's going to make for more minutes for someone like Floyd Badunga, maybe even Zach Clements getting some time at the 5. I know Self has talked a little bit about playing him a little bit more at the 4. That's it. I believe it when I see it, especially considering the depth KU has at kind of those 2, 3, 4 spots. So guys like Zach and Flory, it's going to be a great opportunity for them to get out there against Arkansas and really showcase what they have. Now, the other injury news is Rylan Griffin, the Alabama transfer, had a hip flexor injury he suffered at practice on Monday. He's also a doubt for the Arkansas game. He's someone that was in the mix to potentially earn a starting role, was most likely going to be the 6th man or 7th man, coming off the bench, kind of playing anywhere on the perimeter. A good shooter, someone that, you go from Nate Oates when it's a very open style of basketball to Bill Self when it's a very, I wouldn't say rigid, because Bill Self has shown with past teams, right? He lets them go out and hoop, but there are different demands that Bill Self has. And so I think that's been an acclimation process for Rylan Griffin. I think it's been an acclimation process for AJ Storr. If you listen to Bill Self talk about AJ Storr right now, you can read into all sorts of messaging that's going on with him right now. It's not serious, but we're talking about someone that was a leading scorer at Wisconsin, could kind of do what he wanted, didn't have to defend super hard, didn't have to really rebound. And Bill Self made the point this week that, like it or not, Hunter Dickinson's going to be the leading scorer on this Kansas team. And that means that AJ Storr is going to have to find other ways to make an impact if he's not going to be the leading scorer. And Self has said the ways that you can do that are rebounding and defending. And this has been something Self has talked about going back to June. So this is going to be an ongoing process with Self and Storr to maybe find some middle ground, right? Where I think in AJ's own head and from what Self has described, right, he's a guy that wants to score. You could see it a late night in the Fog. Right? When he's out there, he wants to get a basket because he's really good at it. But you got to be able to work within the team construct. And I think that's an ongoing thing for someone like AJ Storr. And I think generally, guys, like when you look at what Bill Self is doing year in and year out, almost retooling a roster, there is going to be an acclimation process. You saw it with Remy Martin. I think you've seen it with Hunter Dickinson a little bit last year, where KU tried to find ways to hide Hunter defensively and his defensive deficiencies while also still doing some of the stuff that, Bill Self's done for a long time. And I think there's always going to be a little bit of an acclimation process early in a season. And I think that's exactly what you're seeing with guys like AJ Storr, Rylan Griffin. You can even go to someone like David. I guess we're calling him Diggy Coit. I'm not sure if I'm doing that. That's his nickname. But I think top to bottom, right, this part of the year, October, November, it's going to be about, I think self-setting the standard for what he wants this year. And we've seen that in the past with players, and sometimes it's worked and sometimes it hasn't. And sometimes KU's kind of lost players um, early in a year because they haven't really played up to standard, and therefore they don't get the minutes because they're not meeting the standard Bill Self wants. And then as a result, they don't get the minutes, they don't get to develop, and they don't get to earn the trust. Right. And so there's got to be a middle ground here. And I think that's exactly what KU's going to try and find over the next couple of weeks. And I think Friday night against Arkansas, it's a great opportunity for that. It's going to be a different type of exhibition than what KU fans have seen. You think back to last year, you think back to any time KU's done one of the exhibitions against Washburn, Fort Hays State, Pitt State, right? They've looked like a college basketball game. Last year against Illinois, it looked like a college basketball game, right? Stuff you've seen before. But this year, it sounds like this game against Arkansas is going to look a little bit different. Arkansas is also banged up. They might be out 3 players who would be rotational pieces for them this fall, or this winter, I should say. Still TBD on that. We'll have to see what happens pregame. But instead, this game's going to be played in quarters. And Self talked about it a little bit, and there's a story up on fog.net you can go and read with Self's full transcription of the quotes and what he had to say about the game. But he alluded to the fact that they're going to be quarters. Players are not going to foul out, and there may be chances for coaches to get on the floor and actually maybe coach a little bit in between quarters or when there are certain situations. So it feels to me like this exhibition is going to be very much about the coaches can actually coach up the players, whereas in the past it's very much been more of just a real game setting, game flow, timeouts, right, that type of stuff. And so I think there's going to be a happy medium this time, and I'll be interested to see kind of what we get to see. In terms of starters, Self has said, right, DeJuan Harris going to start, Zeke Mayo going to start, KJ Adams going to start. The other 2 spots are up for grabs. Again, I refer you back to what I just said about AJ Storr. There's all sorts of messaging going on here, and I think this is something that, Bill Self's not going to say AJ Storr is going to start until Storr showcases what Self wants to see. And so I'll be interested to see who Self tabs. I think by the end of the season and really by the time the real games come, I think AJ Storr will be a starter, but there's some tug and pull going on. And so I think then at the 5 could be Flory. Look, if you want to throw Zach Clements a bone for being a veteran who stuck around, did the redshirt year, and you say, hey, you're the experienced guy, you start, I think that's totally reasonable as well. So it'll be a good opportunity to see some of these guys. Shaquille Moore will not play. He is close to being back in practice, but he is someone that will not play. So KU likely to be down Hunter Dickinson, Rylan Griffin, Shaquille Moore. Good opportunity for some other guys. You think about, I'm going to say it again, Diggy Coit, I guess, for him to come in and showcase the scoring ability he has. For Raquise Passmore, someone that was really good over the summer and has had a really good kind of first few months in Lawrence. Can he come in and showcase that athleticism and that natural talent that he has and that he's shown in practice before? So this is a really interesting team because we got to see how all these pieces come together. And Friday night will be really the first opportunity to see something. I'm not going to overreact to what we see on Friday. It's not going to determine if Kansas is going to go win a national title this year. It's not going to determine if they're going to win the Big 12 or not, but it's a good baseline to figure out where this team is at. And there's going to be an acclimation process early in the year. So that's what I got for basketball. Obviously, plenty of coverage up on fog.net. And obviously now you can look ahead to this K-State game for KU football. It's a huge game for the Jayhawks. You're looking at a team that is going to try and snap a 15-game losing streak. This is going to be a rowdy environment in Manhattan, a 7 p.m. kickoff time. I think there are probably a lot of people that are hoping to be maybe 11 a.m. because those tend to have a little bit less rowdy crowds. And this one's going to be full bore and full blast, and it should be a great atmosphere in Manhattan. A few keys for KU in this one. We'll have a VIP story up diving into a lot of the advanced numbers and some of the stuff you got to know about Kansas, where they can attack K-State, where KU's got to be really on their P's and Q's. And I think first and foremost there, this is going to have to be the game of the life for the linebackers. They've got it coming with Avery Johnson, the run game, and what K-State has with Giddens and Dylan Edwards. Giddens is a physical running back, a guy that's hard to tackle. Dylan Edwards, one of the best athletes in his high school class. They're a great 1-2 punch. You look at Avery Johnson, what he can provide. Like, this is going to be the game where KU needs Cornell Wheeler, J.B. Brown, and maybe Tywone Berryhill to have the game of their life. And if they do, maybe KU can get some stops because the secondary is going to have a really solid game as well. But for KU, big time game for the linebackers on offense. Can't turn the ball over, right? We've seen this time and time again. Special teams can't make mistakes. Think back to 2022. There's the fumble or muffed punt, I should say, from O.J. Burrows inside the 10-yard line. It sets up a K-State score after KU got a stop. You look back last year, right? I mean, KU fans, you guys know. There's the dropped interception that was probably a pick six for Rich Miller. There's the muff punt from Trevor Wilson. There's the interceptions throughout the course of the game, right? Too many mistakes. KU's got to play a clean game, start to finish, to have a shot at winning this game. And that's the best part about the Big 12 right now, is you can't go into any game and say one team doesn't have a chance. It's a competitive conference, and this is going to be a very competitive game. Look, I know the betting spread's been up around 10 points this week. I probably would take KU to cover that just because of the fact that KU's played in a lot of one-score games, and this game has a feeling of one that's going to be a one-score game that's going to come down to who makes the less amount of mistakes and who, late in the fourth quarter, can put together the key drive. Is it going to be Jalen Daniels? Will it be Avery Johnson? We'll have to wait and see. But that's enough of me talking. Let's get to Tim Fitzgerald, take a deep dive into this KU versus K-State matchup. All right, we are now joined by Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com. We're going to dive a little bit into the Sunflower Showdown. I think the Abolition Bowl is what Fitz is trying to go with as the new name for it, or the Battle of John Brown's Rifle? Fitz,
yeah, I've tried a number of things. I think I'm settling on the word of abolition because we should celebrate that we were for freedom. We should. It's a rich part of Lawrence's history. I really do. And Sunflower Showdown so lame. Let's talk about something else. It just makes me angry.
Let's talk some football. How about that, Fitz? We were talking before we hit record how busy it's been for you guys with the way the kickoff schedules have been. For KU, it's been a lot of 2:30 kicks. There have been a couple, of night kicks early in the year, a couple, not as much now. But for K-State, it is night kick, road night kick. Let's start there. Like, as someone that covers the team, right, how challenging has that been? And then for the team generally, like going into this game, I mean, how have the night kicks, where if you're on the road, you're not getting back until Sunday, technically. How much is that having an impact on just the team right now?
It's been pretty drastic. You talk about the BYU game. Well, first of all, K-State played awful, and things just really rolled BYU's way in the heart of that game. And so, they wanted to get out of there, and they did. They hustled out, and, we had a very fast post game, which was fine. We were all fine with it because it was getting late out there. They didn't get home. Like they got to the football complex at 5:15 a.m. So the coaches stuff weren't at home till like 6 a.m. on Sunday morning. That just throws your whole week out of whack. You've now missed a night's sleep, basically. Even if you slept on a plane, it's not the same. Now, luckily, then they went into Oklahoma State prep and then an off week. And that was, so they kind of caught up. You go to Colorado, and the game even lasted longer. And it started a little bit earlier, but it lasted longer. They didn't get home from Colorado till like 4:15, and it's a much shorter trip. And then they find out, they turn around and go to a night game at West Virginia. Luckily, of course, it wasn't Pac-12 after dark, Big 12 after dark. But it's been a challenge. It has, and all the media is worn out too. It's kind of comical. We don't get the nice little charter flight direct back. I went with no sleep and was at the Pittsburgh airport at 5:45 a.m. to encounter the worst security setup in the world of airports. And got home at 11:30 a.m. and finally fell asleep at noon. It's a lot, but if this conference is going to be sprawling, this is what's going to happen. And it's just the new reality. And as I've told my listeners and viewers quite a bit, I'm a big fan of Big 12 After Dark, unless it's my team. Then I'm not nearly as big a fan. because it's exhausting, and those games go really late at night. And I don't know about you, but the older I get, the earlier I go to bed. So it's been a challenge.
Yeah, I am dreading Fitz when KU goes to BYU in a couple weeks, and that's going to be a 9:30 Central kick.
Mhm.
We'll see if I end up making the trip out for the game. That's going to be a killer. But when you think about this game, then Fitz, obviously a rivalry game. It's going to have some juice to it for the players, right?
Right.
Even I listen to Chris Kleiman talk about it. You listen to Lance Leipold talk about it. Both coaches play it down with their team. Kleiman, I know, said he doesn't mention the streak to his team. Leipold said they don't really make a big deal out of it because you still got to play, 4 more games coming out of the bye week.
Mhm.
And so there's going to be juice, though. You can't say that there's not going to be. How do you feel like K-State's going to end up managing this? Because for KU, they've been at home, right? It goes bye week, home against Houston. Then you're still basically in the state of Kansas. I guess technically, for Houston, they're in Missouri a little bit, but you're still home,
Yeah.
and there's not a lot of travel. And then you look at K-State, and it's the exact opposite. So how
Right.
do you feel like they're going to be able to respond to what has been just a draining schedule?
Well, it'll be interesting. Coach Kleiman mentioned that he didn't think his team had much fire coming off the bus to go into, prepare for West Virginia.
Hmm.
And they kind of played like that early, but they were clearly the better team. And once Garrett Green got hurt, it really got blown open. But
Yeah.
K-State always gets a little juiced up for this. There's so many Kansas kids on that roster and in such important roles. That it doesn't ever escape them. And I truly believe that plays a big role now in the streak. I think Coach Leipold's done a better job of finding Kansas kids. I mean, there's one at running back that's a perfect example of how good he is. But there's still kind of a disparity between the number of players. But I think it works well for Kansas State to have this one at night too, so that they can kind of ease into it on Saturday. But I never thought I'd say this, but I miss 11 a.m. games. The Big 12 doesn't have as many as they used to. They got shipped out with Oklahoma, which loves them. They went to the SEC. It's kind of funny. The Big 12 just doesn't have many 11 a.m. slots anymore.
No, look, I love 11 a.m.
I do.
kicks. As a morning person, I think they're great. But let's dive into this a little bit for K-State then. Obviously, Avery Johnson is a big story for K-State this year. They make the move, right? The decision that it's time for Avery to start. Will Howard, thanks, but you can move on. And it's Avery's show. I'm curious, watching him against Tulane and then watching him against West Virginia, it felt like, I wouldn't say two different quarterbacks, but a quarterback that didn't look like a freshman anymore against West Virginia. Talk to us a little bit about his progression this year and where you've seen kind of the growth and where you still feel like there are more areas where he can improve his game.
I think the coaches made a mistake early in the season of keeping him bottled up in the pocket a little bit too much. They're worried about his health. You look around this conference and you can see what happens quite often when a quarterback gets hurt. The whole team changes. Utah's going through that. We've seen other programs go through it. You don't always have a Jason Bean as your backup. That's in this day and age, it's exceedingly rare to have someone of that quality still on your roster. And K-State is fairly unproven at the backup spot. They had Robertson come in a little bit in the Colorado game, or what's Colorado? And he played well. I can't remember. It's all a blur now. But it's interesting to watch how he's progressed now. He's gotten comfortable as a quarterback. And that happened when he started mixing in the run and really kind of got into the flow of things. Well, Colorado gets banged up. Of course, he had to come out. Robertson came in for a little bit. I think it was a hip pointer. They've never exactly said. And so this week going to West Virginia, the idea was don't run Avery, have him be a passer. He didn't move around a lot. The offensive line did its best job of the season protecting him. And he was able to throw for 298 yards and 3 touchdowns. And honestly, Michael makes some really tough, tight window passes that he wasn't making earlier in the year. Those were interceptions because they were off.
I really like watching Avery because I think he's the modern type of quarterback, a little bit like what we've seen from Jalen too, as he has found his form again. A guy that's got the arm strength to make the throws, got the mobility to extend plays. And look, I think both these quarterbacks too are rounding into form at the right time. When you look at the K-State offense, though, right, you've got a new play caller, it's a new quarterback. Is this offense much different than what it's been under Kleiman, or have they tried to keep things the same? Compare it to what we've seen in past years, to what we're seeing now. How much different is K-State offensively?
I don't think a whole lot. I really don't. I mean, they lean on their running game a lot. DJ Giddens has been, just amazing for most of the season, to the point where Colorado had to sell out to stop the run and gave up a long bomb. And West Virginia was focused on stopping the run and got torched by Avery's arm. And they throw to the tight end a lot. So there's a lot of similarities. But I need to say this. I think where KU and K-State are at an advantage in college football is you've got to have a mobile quarterback now. You can't play 10 on 11 in the running game.
Yeah.
You have to have a running threat. I mean, when Alan Bowman enrolled in college in the 1970s, it was all about pocket passers. And now the game is, you got to have that threat. If they don't have to account for you in the running game, they just got an extra guy running around screwing up your plays. Yeah. And we even saw it when he came back in at BYU. They used him a little bit in the running game, and it worked. So it's a threat you have to have. Will Howard could run, but Avery's a legitimate running threat. I mean, he might be the fastest guy on the team. So you put him out there with Dylan Edwards, and DJ Giddens isn't the kind of burner, but he's a big, powerful guy that has a great moves. Put those guys out there to field together. It's a lot of weapons for a defense to worry about.
Yeah, and that's the thing I've circled with this game for KU, at least, is the quarterback run game. I don't need to tell KU fans how much mobile quarterbacks have hurt KU this year. You look at Sluka for UNLV, Garrett Green ran all over KU. It's been a recurring issue, and this for me is going to be a huge game for KU's linebackers. Can they spy Avery Johnson? And look, even if you're in Avery's vicinity, he's got the speed to be able to make you miss. And so that for me is going to be such a huge game, or a huge aspect of this game for KU, is how can they contain Avery. I am curious, where is he in terms of decision making? Because I think, right, you look at his numbers so far this year, I think he's done a really good job of not a lot of turnover-worthy plays, but 5 interceptions on the year.
Yeah.
Where is he in terms of just protecting the football and not putting it at risk?
Getting better. I think most of his interceptions have just been, or they were early on and misfires. His one at Colorado was a 4th down. So he's trying to put the ball in somewhere that Colorado had covered. So it got tipped and intercepted. So there's times to take risks, and, those always haven't worked out, but he's gotten a lot better. He still, goes through his progressions a lot of times, but other times you'll see him, just ignore open guys or not quite see them, not react to them. And that happened a few times at West Virginia, but he has gotten a lot better, and he's a lot more comfortable moving around in a pocket. He doesn't have as much happy feet as he did, just like when you mentioned, like Tulane. He just wasn't fully comfortable standing in a pocket. That's never been his game, but now he's doing more of it and getting better at it. The kid learns really quickly, which is a little bit scary.
And overall for K-State then offensively, right, they've done a really good job of consistently putting up yards. When they have had lulls in a game, what has led to those lulls, or what have opposing defenses done well that has resulted in K-State maybe having 2-3 drives where maybe things aren't clicking and they're not scoring?
They get a little stale in play calling, and I think Connor Riley has admitted that. For example, at Tulane, their second to last possession, he ran it 3 times into the line, and then they punted, and Tulane got the ball back to try to win the game. He's learning as he goes too, that there's times to take chances and times where you shouldn't be. I mean, you shouldn't. If you go down the field on 1st down, you put yourself in a hole. So he does run the ball more on 1st down than probably what a lot of teams would. But DJ Giddens has been so good heading into West Virginia. He was averaging 7.2 yards per carry, which is an obnoxious number. And they did a good job, but they just dedicated their resources to take him away. And he ended up hurting him. He had a huge play on a pass play. So it's everybody's getting there. The offense is getting there. They've made so much progress over the course of the season, and I think there's a lot more progress to be made. I think they still have a long ways to go before they're even close to their ceiling.
Let's switch to defense. Looking at some of the numbers for K-State in the front seven, like they've done such a good job of stopping the opposing run game. Like, I mean, it's pretty crazy when you think about it. I think it's 2.7 yards a carry, like 85, 83 yards a game on the ground. Is this front seven a bunch of new guys? Is it guys that have been in the program? How exactly have you gone about building this really stout run defense?
Look, if you look at the players they have up front, you would never say, "Ooh, this is a run stuffing defense." I mean, they just don't have that kind of size and intimidation you would see from like a Texas. But they've got a great mix of young and old, of experienced and guys who have a huge upside who are just kind of finding their way. Brendan Mott has been absolutely incredible as a defensive end, and his advancement through the years. He was kind of the second pony to Felix Anudike-Uzomah, and everyone said, when he returned last year, he had the most returning sacks in the Big 12. It was something that kind of snuck up on people because he always had single blocking. Well, now he's proving even in double teams he can get through that. But they go at least 3 deep at defensive end. They can rotate a lot of guys out there, keep them fresh. And they also now throw out a 4-man front on occasion. The second defensive tackle is a big defensive end. But it's been really effective, and they mix and match those defenses quite a bit, and their linebackers have turned into a really good group. Austin Romaine at middle linebacker, he was thrown into the mix last year as a true freshman when Daniel Green got hurt, and then another player got hurt. And so they went to Romaine, and he was good, but he just kind of wore down. The kid went to work in the summer. He looks totally different. His demeanor's totally different, and he's now a pretty damn good middle linebacker as a true sophomore. That class is, Avery Johnson and him and Jace Brown, the receiver, and then you can throw Dylan Edwards in as another true sophomore that's really going to be the foundation of this program for years to come. And they've all been really good this year. But run defense has been a really valuable thing for Kansas State. The back end of the defense, on the other hand, has had some struggles at times, and that's been where the concern is.
I want to get there in 1 second.
Okay.
But when you so K-State's defense and big picture with Joe Klanderman calling the plays, have they been for example, we've been talking about this on the message board for KU this week. Against Houston, they blitzed a lot more. It was something like double-digit blitzes. Like, that's not who KU is. They're very much a rush for, drop back, keep everything in front. Has K-State been this year a team that is trying to get on the front foot, blitz, maybe more chances, or is this a defense that is really relying on the front, whether it be 3 or 4, and sending guys back? How have they tried to approach things this year?
It's been different depending on the quarterback they're facing. The Tulane quarterback, who they didn't know a lot about because it was early in the season and he's a redshirt freshman. As the game progressed, they just kept coming after him. He hadn't seen a lot of college football and probably isn't used to guys that are at the Big 12 level. And so he'd throw the ball away a lot. He was really good, though. And Alan Bowman, they blitzed the hell out of him because if he sees pressure, he just throws it into the stands. It's the most pathetic thing I've ever seen. They had to be different with Shadur because of his, ability to move around. But Garrett Green was really the first guy they ran into that was a runner. They had elusive quarterbacks in Fafita and Sanders, but they don't really want to run. They want to throw the ball. Green wants to run, and eventually he did and got injured from it. But that's a problem. It's a real concern with Jalen Daniels. But they'll blitz when they feel like they need to, but they do a pretty good job out of those 3-man fronts of coming with a fourth person and really mixing it up and being effective in that when they have to.
Yeah. Well, all right, let's get to the secondary then, because I think, when I was doing some initial research on this game, and something I mentioned on our message board as well, you looked at K-State and like the run defense numbers off the charts, like elite across the board. And then you looked at what K-State has been against other teams that are decent passing attacks, and it's just not been as good, more kind of middle of the road numbers overall. What's happened? Where have been kind of some of the holes in that secondary?
Well, at Tulane, the zone coverage was an absolute train wreck. They had guys doing the wrong things and doing man when they were in zone and vice versa. It was a mess. they've gotten better with that, but they're still much more effective in man than zone. They used zone quite a bit last week and got an interception out of it. But, you look at Garrett Green and he's not particularly accurate. So
No.
you're not need to cover everyone man. They got so beat up at Colorado that at the end of the game, I was having to get out the roster, not the depth chart, the roster to figure out who K-State was playing back there because they had like 3 or 4 injuries in a row, almost all in the secondary. And so they've gotten better. They really have. But they have room to make improvement, and they still screw up that zone defense once in a while. You'll see a guy that clearly isn't in the right place doing the right thing because there's a receiver just standing all alone. Now, with all that said, they've had 3 different quarterbacks throw for 300 yards against the secondary this year, and all of those quarterbacks lost the game. So it's kind of defied logic of how this defense has performed because they've given up a lot of pass yardage, but not as much yard after catch yardage. And that's really what's been key. For example, when they played Arizona, they got McMillan on the ground. He caught 11 passes, but he didn't go very far with any of them. And that's really been an important part of this. They're giving up completions, but quite often they're tackling pretty soundly on the back end.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing. I think for KU fans, at least, you can look back at the TCU game as an example of that, where at times in the game, KU tackled, and TCU's guys would get 10 yards or 8 yards, and KU would tackle, and then all of a sudden you miss a tackle, and it's a 53-yard score that flips the game on its head.
Yep.
So, Fitz, I want to go here to wrap up.
Yep.
What concerns you most about this game? Looking at this from a broad perspective, where do you feel like either KU can hurt K-State, or where you're concerned about K-State's ability to do this against KU?
Well, this is going to sound so cliche, but KU's got to be the best 2-5 team in college football by far. I mean, they've been in every game they've lost, and what happened to them this year defies explanation. I've never seen anything like it, but this is still a wildly talented team. They've got I'm a big Jalen Daniels fan. I know he's struggled at times this year, but I think he's settling back in. He's been through a lot. Probably the nature of his game's changed from the back situation. And I think he showed last week he's kind of learning to be his new version. I love Devin Neal. And, the whole running game is effective for KU. They got effective receivers. So this is a talented team. And this is basically the main way they can salvage some kind of respect out of a season that's gone south. Like running the table would be a big deal, but to do that, you got to beat K-State. So I think ending this streak, winning in Manhattan, all those things will be highly motivating to Kansas. And again, Lance Leipold, every time he's been in one of these games, has prepared his team better than what we've seen in the past. They should have won last year. We all recognize that. They probably lost that game just because of the weight of the streak kind of hanging around. They found a way to lose in some ways. I mean, dropping that interception would have, that changed the whole game.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things you do when you're on the wrong end of a streak. So yeah, I think if they come in, relax, just play with like they have nothing to lose, K-State could be in trouble. This definitely is a game to worry about for K-State fans. I know you can look at those records and see 2 different teams, but they're really not that far apart in terms of skill sets.
I agree. And I think it's a good point about the game last year, right? You muff a punt, you drop a pick six. Those are things that if KU's playing UCF,
right?
Probably, you make the play, and it's just different when you're playing in a rivalry game and you got the
weight
of it.
I mean, just a lot of weird stuff happened last year.
Yeah, and so weird stuff tends to happen in this game, Fitz.
Yeah.
2 years ago, right? OJ Burroughs muffs the punt inside the 10 when KU had some early momentum in that game, and it just flips the whole thing on its head. So I think for KU this week, like, it is all about, can you avoid just the disastrous meltdown plays, a pick six, a fumble inside your own 20, like stuff like that. And if KU can do that, like, there's nothing to say this can't be a game. I know that the spread is in the double digits range. It's been all over the place. I think this is a 1-score game.
I agree.
Who makes the fewest amount of mistakes? And I really think that's what it's going to come down to.
And, on paper so far this season, that would be K-State. But again, you got to put the 2 teams on the field and let them play. And you're right. Weird things can happen. I think K-State's in a good headspace in terms of the self-belief, which goes a long ways. but also they're pretty worn out. Overall, they're fairly healthy. They've got some, offensive linemen banged up. As I mentioned, Avery's a little banged up, but you're about ready to play the 8th game of the season. Guys are bruised up. That's just the nature of the game. So whoever's kind of most engaged early in this game, I think is going to win.
Yeah, fast start. Leipold talks about that a
Mm-hmm.
lot with the road games, right? You got to take the
Yep.
crowd out of it. 7 p.m. kickoff time too. I mean, the K-State fans, you have all day to get ready for it. So it should be a great atmosphere. Fits for KU fans that want to make the treacherous journey over. Where can they go find all your content?
Oh, just go check out YouTube. I mean, we've put a ton of stuff up there. We do 4 podcasts a week during football season. I'm gonna finish up with you and record one of mine. So there's just a ton of content. My daily deliveries. I think I had one on Oklahoma, Nebraska. KU fans would greatly enjoy yesterday. But yeah, and we're pivoting now to a lot more coverage of this KU game because this is a big one. This is the West Virginia game opened up a much more manageable part of the season for K-State. It's the first time this season they've got more home games or road games ahead of them. And they got an off week after going to Houston in a week. So they have an opportunity here to maybe settle in and accomplish some things. But you got to get by a really talented KU team, which I think, even though they've got Iowa State on the road down at the end of the year, I think KU might still be the most talented team they're going to face in these final 5 games.
I agree. Well, it's going to be a great game on Saturday. Fitz, excited to see you in Manhattan. Thanks for taking some time to jump on the podcast with us.
You bet, my brother. Anytime.
All right. A huge thank you to Tim for joining the podcast. That's going to do it. Thanks as always for listening to the Fog.net podcast. We have plenty of coverage up on Fog.net previewing the Arkansas game. We'll have plenty of content breaking down the Arkansas game. Plenty of stuff from the Sunflower Showdown. I'll be in attendance in Manhattan. Post-game video will come your way probably about an hour and a half, hour after the game. So be on the lookout for that. And obviously back for a podcast on Sunday with Kevin Flaherty. So, hey, thanks as always for watching. Make sure if you're watching this on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment. All that stuff goes a long way in helping us out and helping this channel grow. If you're listening on the preferred podcast platform of your choice, also leave us a rating, leave us a review. Again, it goes a long way in helping us out with the old algorithm. So, hey, thanks as always for listening to the podcast. I hope everyone has a great weekend.